Hypothesis. Uncertainty of rights and settlement circumstances that have been enforced internally and externally throughout the history of Cantagallo are replicated in the implementation of the VPR project. The community in Cantagallo is feeling the effects of differential levels of environmental injustice in their lack of recognition, participation, and distribution of resources. This further contributes to their mal-recognition within the city. Cantagallo, built on top of a landfill site and along the River Rimac, is home to more than 5,000 people, including more than 200 families of Shipibos. It is attracting the city's attention as a center of indigenous culture, but yet it is also a land of uncertainty, conflict, and poor living standards. The water and sanitation infrastructure in Cantagallo is a lens through which the problems of justice, rights, distribution, and recognition can be explained. In the entire area of Cantagallo, there are only 4 public toilets. With the poor quality of water pipes and pumps in Zone 3, Shipibos have access to water only in the morning, and women and mothers have to get up at 3 a.m. in order to secure the water for the day. They are also the primary income earners in the family and community through their handicraft activities, so this puts an extra burden upon them. The price of water is not affordable for some members of the community, particularly for those in Zone 3. Those people often have to borrow water from neighbors or take loans from the savings groups. Attempts to improve the water infrastructure in Zone 3 has not only been expensive, but sadly unsuccessful. The water pipes existing now in Zone 3 were installed 5 years ago, with an extension installed 3 months ago by Sedipal. However, the new pipes are too small, and the water pressure is not high enough to send the water to many houses on top of the hill. Now the extra cost of redoing the installation is a big burden for the Shipibo community. Sanitation is another problem for those living in Zone 3. There are no toilets in Zone 3, and they have to find their own alternative ways or pay each time they use the public toilets installed in Zone 2. Comparatively, Zone 1 and 2 have 24 hours of water supply and have access to 5 different public toilets, which are also used for showering and washing of clothes. A few houses have independent toilets inside, but this is extremely rare. However, consistent use of these public facilities can prove to be expensive, particularly for the most vulnerable. The people of Cantagallo are currently threatened with the implementation of the project Via Parque Rio Rimac. The project will transform the area of Cantagallo into a municipal park. A lot of the work has already begun around the area, without formal consultation or informing the majority of the residents. Soon the community as a whole will have to be relocated. While it involves everyone, only 205 Shipibo families have been promised to be part of a pilot social housing initiative with new housing for the relocation. For the non-Shipibo population of upward of 4,000, only 40 houses are promised to the most elderly and vulnerable.
Igual también hemos pedido al Ministerio de Vivienda, ¿no? El Ministerio de Vivienda también ha pedido que nos apoyen, pero no hay ningún apoyo, por eso lo que nosotros ahora también.
Therefore, the detail of the relocation for the rest of the community members are very unclear, and different associations in Zone 2 and 1 are expecting and claiming different future scenarios, none of which have been negotiated officially with the municipality. There has been no approach from the municipality to the members of Zone 1 and 2 to negotiate the terms of the relocation. The few articles and credible information sources we found helped us capture only a small piece of the whole picture of Cantagallo. Before the group actually witnessed the reality on the field, our understanding of the area was mainly focused on the ongoing VPR project and its impact on the Shipibo community, which represents only about 1/5 of the whole population of Cantagallo. However, our focus on Shipibos was unavoidable, since the story of the indigenous tribal community was the only available information, whereas the rest of the community was a shadowed area, unrevealed to us yet. One of our principal plans was to investigate the ethnic misrecognition and discrimination within the city as a main contribution to the maldistribution of basic infrastructure in Cantagallo. Nonetheless, as we arrived in Lima and started our field research, we discovered the problems faced by the whole community of Cantagallo were much more complicated and complex. Moreover, as we were researching, we started to identify the root causes of the issues which have been developed throughout the history of Cantagallo since the 1960s. Cantagallo's history goes back to the 1960s, when the first of 3 settlement stages took place. In 1971, the first attempt to build a park in Cantagallo led to the eviction of the informal population, yet this was done without any detailed plans to develop it. The area was then put aside for use as a common land. The second stage of the settlement took place in 1997. Due to the classification of the center of Lima as a UNESCO heritage site, market vendors around the central market were encouraged to move to this empty space nearby. After protest by those forced to move, a presidential mandate from Fujimori provided the area with basic services. A competition was held to decide who should be provided with market units in Zone 1 and a plot of housing in Zone 2. Over 100,000 people applied, with only 5,010 of the most vulnerable being successful. These people were then encouraged to move to the area to create a secondary central market. Issues of transportation and accessibility remain, however, and the economic potential of the area was held back. The third stage of settlement in Cantagallo was the beginning of Shipibo history in the area. In 2000, a group of 15 Shipibo Coniba families arrived in Lima from Pucallpa to participate in a crafts fair, while at the same time looking for social services and market opportunities that they believed would only be found in a major city. On moving to Cantagallo, these families were soon joined by others already living in Barrios Altos across the river. Their first settlement took place in the corner of Zone 2. This, however, got increasingly crowded as more Shipibos came to Cantagallo. They organized themselves under the name ADAP, which later became Ashirel. In 2005, a few Shipibo families moved onto the land next to this area, which was a landfill site. Since then, this area has grown and attracted more Shipibos from across the city and the jungle to consolidate their community. While the Shipibos began to populate their new space in the city, the rest of the community in Cantagallo was also expanding. Due to infrastructure development and fragmented urban planning policies across Lima, many people experienced eviction and relocation, either of their businesses or of their homes. They have been encouraged or attracted to move to the area because of the more affordable rents for commercial, industrial, or housing units, or instructed to by whichever organization have been implicit in their relocation. This has led to many different associations representing the different interests of the community and their claims to the area and land tenure. The first commercial group to relocate to Zone 1 in 1997 was Asociación Civil Cantagallo. This was followed by others in 2003 and beyond, namely Asociación Central Los Malvinas, Asociación Santa Rosa, and Microempresarios. Zone 2 residents and businesses are represented by Apiacar and Empresarial. The Shipibo community in Zone 2 have kept their association Avshil, while those who have moved to Zone 3 are now represented by Akushikulm. There are several types of division in Cantagallo. First is the division of zones. Second is the division of ethnicity and culture. And third is the division of associations that represent all of the people. Although residents of Cantagallo share common challenges, such as infrastructure quality and relocation, people from different parts of the division are facing different futures. The Shipibo community in Zone 3 and in part of Zone 2 have used the International Labour Law 169 for the rights of the indigenous and tribal people to ensure that they were consulted when their current settlement was put under threat by the Via Parque Rio Rimac. This is usually enacted when indigenous land is threatened by mining or oil companies prospecting in rural areas, so this is a particularly unique case. This has contributed to the higher level of engagement between the Shipibos and the authorities. Their future and relocation is being planned by the Lima municipality and the Ministry of Housing, Construction and Sanitation, and they have been promised to be part of a social housing pilot scheme in the city centre. Community members of different associations from Zone 1 and Zone 2 are, however, exposed to different possible scenarios, and many have not yet been approached for negotiations with the authorities. The deciding factor between the Shipibos and the other residents is that the land which Zone 1 and Zone 2 is owned by INASE, which is a government-owned company, while the Shipibos have encroached into Zone 3, the former landfill site, which is public land owned by the municipality directly. INASE was given the responsibility to install basic infrastructure and to make the land inhabitable. They complied with this by providing the public toilets and water points, as well as a mains electricity point from where the community could connect themselves to provide electricity for their homes and businesses. The newly appointed legal residents of Cantagallo were then given autonomy in the governance and management of their new site. This was due to the land tenure status of the land they occupied. They did not reside within the governance of the municipal authority, and so were not granted the same representation and rights as Limonians at that municipal level. Instead, 5,000 people lived on an island, flanked on one side by the Rio Rimac and on the other by a major highway, with only a side road and a walkway connecting them, and all in between being privately owned, albeit by a public company. To meet their needs, the residents formed associations with leadership structures that would manage the relationship with service providers, such as Sedipal, and deal with land management issues, with INASE. Over the last 2 decades, these associations have fragmented further due to differences of opinion, primarily on whether to try to buy the land from INASE or not. By living and trading on private land, traders were not required to pay taxes, as this would be the responsibility of the landowner, who would effectively be leasing the land to them. There are now 14 formal and informal associations representing the different categories of residents, such as commercial and housing. Although they work and live in close proximity to each other in Zone 1 and Zone 2, and their needs are very similar, there is still an element of distrust between the associations, resulting in a reluctance to work with one another. Due to Lima's unique position within the country, as home to a third of the national population and being a center for almost all trade and commerce with East Asia and the rest of the world, the national government has always had a vested interest in the city's management and development. This has led to power imbalances between the municipal government, their responsibility to Limonians, and the national government and its responsibility to the development of Peru as a whole. The Via Parque Rio Rimac project is just another in a long line of examples. The national government signed off this project to answer to the problem of gridlocked traffic through the center of Lima. Citywide domestic traffic combines with that of the Interamericana Highway, which runs through the center of the city, as well as cargo being transported to and from the country's only main port in Callao. Easing access to this port, for a country that is exploiting its mineral wealth to grow economically, is a priority for the government. This is one of the main reasons given for the implementation of the VPR project. The municipality's role is to inform those affected by such mega projects and to ensure their compliance, even if this detrimentally affects the same people who voted for this municipal government to represent them. This lack of decision-making power for the municipal government on issues that affect the people they represent is reflected in the mal-recognition and lack of participation in the decision-making process by the people of Cantagallo. Although the site is officially recognized within the city, they do not have the representation at a district or municipal level that most areas in Lima enjoy. In addition to the power imbalances, Lack of concrete information about their future is putting the people of Cantagallo in a more vulnerable position and increasing their uncertainty. The negotiations between the municipality and the community have only been piecemeal, and you could argue that they have taken the opportunity of fragmentation between the associations to divide and rule, offering some form of compensation to one, but not to another. Whereas some communities are offered relocation packages, others only know of the plans to turn their home into a park through a billboard in the city centre, resulting in rumours and fears. OAS, the Brazilian engineering company implementing the VPR project, has left it to the municipality to negotiate the removal of the inhabitants of Cantagallo, allowing only their visible presence to convey the future plans. Our research also found that, on the whole, any official information the municipality has given to an association has not been disseminated to the others, as the communication lines between them do not exist. Without this, the community is left in uncertainty and cannot build strategies or future scenarios to cope with the current circumstances. The city of Lima has been without a centralized strategy or plan for urban growth since the creation of the Institute of Municipal Planning in 1991. Since this time, the city's population has grown by approximately 2 million. The continuous relocation of people to and from the different areas of Lima to make way for infrastructure projects, area regeneration or gentrification, or international mandates such as UNESCO, is typical in the planning process of Lima's urban growth. There is wide evidence that the precedent in city planning does not go to the people affected by the implementation of a project, but instead to the project itself and to the people who are funding it. The private sector infrastructure megaprojects that take place in Lima are a sign of the neoliberal approach the national and city government has adopted for the last decades. This has led to infrastructure projects that are not aligned with the needs of underprivileged segments of the population and their own struggle with economic development. To emphasize this point further, we can look at the original negotiation the national government had with OAS, the construction company, in which no housing and relocation was perceived. This was, however, brought in for a select few by the municipal authorities at a later date. We can also visualize the effects of these policies in the use of Cantagallo as a sink for those who are affected by these projects to move to, either under suggestion by the city planners or because no other option is given to them. This shows a lack of foresight on behalf of the planners, as just like floodwaters meeting a concrete defense and then moving its destructive power elsewhere, the issues of the people affected will eventually have to be dealt with. Another example of the lack of foresight in planning is within the proposed and highly acclaimed relocation and rehousing program of the Shipibo community in Cantagallo. A site has been chosen next to the Rio Rimac, on the bank opposite the current location. However, this is on lower ground than the landfill site they currently reside on, and they have already experienced flooding when the Rimac burst its banks in the high rainy season. The river is also predicted to flood more as the glacial ice caps that feed it melt rapidly due to climate change, thus increasing the risk to the new settlement and potentially forcing them to be relocated again. When it comes to relocation, the diversity, division and different problems in Cantagallo will have different effects on each one of these three zones. The best case scenario would assure the Shipibos the relocation they've been promised, and for the non-Shipibos a fair, transparent negotiation regarding their wish to buy the land and the municipality's need to relocate them to another place. However, the reality people face is very different. While it is very likely that the Shipibos get their promised new place on the other side of the Rio Rimac, the situation of Zone 1 and 2 is very complicated. First of all, there has been no negotiation regarding the VPR project and the people's future with the non-Shipibos. On the other hand, the non-Shipibos in these areas claim their rights to buy and own the land they live on. Moreover, they argue that the municipality only owns the land in Zone 3. Therefore, it is not within its rights to decide what happens with the land in Zone 1 and 2, let alone the people's lives. Unfortunately, even though they were moved to Cantagallo by Fujimori's presidential resolution, neither this advantage nor the ambiguity of the land tenure will be enough for the VPR project to stop. Therefore, the people living in Zone 1 and 2 will still have to be relocated. Now that the reality of Cantagallo and some of the root causes of its problems have been identified, we have devised some best coping strategies for the possible future scenarios that have been proposed. Expanded dialogue. To address the key issues of fragmentation between the many different associations within Cantagallo, it is integral for mechanisms to be put in place which allow for an expanded dialogue between the leadership of these groups. This will help in identifying areas of conflict and interest, particularly around the relocation process, and to combat the municipality's perceived strategy of divide and conquer over the area. As the process of the relocation is both ongoing and imminent, so it is suggested that the leadership have bi-weekly meetings, alternating the venue between the offices of different associations to ensure equity. This can be a space where not only the distribution of people through the relocation process is discussed, but also the distribution of available resources to deal with other issues such as water and sanitation infrastructure. It is highly important that at least 2 or 3 members from all the associations attend the bi-weekly meetings. We believe the most experienced people, men and women, from both Shipibos and non-Shipibo associations should participate at these events. It is also important that representatives for the whole of Cantagallo are chosen to chair this leadership group and to be key contact points for negotiations. It is recognized that the members of the different associations have different wants and needs, and that these will need to be negotiated for separately. However, by organizing and forming a united front, the municipality is no longer dealing with 14 groups of 300 to 400 people who are easily ignored, but instead a group of over 5,000. This leadership role can again be rotated for the sake of equity and be the bridging tool to institutions outside of the community. The expansion of dialogue within the association must also flow bottom-up as well as top-down. At present, there is a lot of trust put into the leadership to deal with the relocation process. It is the role of the leadership to disseminate the progress and information they have to the people they represent. Social media can be a key tool in doing this. There are several internet cafes on the site. Many of the community members have smartphones that enable them to access the internet. Not only the leadership can make timely updates, but the community can also post questions and their own suggestions, providing a platform for two-way communication. Social media has been used before as a tool for uniting a community and promoting a cause through viral advocacy videos, public petitions, fundraising, online demonstrations, and in this case, the ability to monitor the construction and the relocation or eviction process. Another strategy, which people in Cantagallo may want to take into account, is the creation of public defense mechanisms through existing legal instruments, such as the presidential resolution, the legal right to purchase land after residing 10 years in the settlement, and for the Shipibos, the International Labour Organization's Convention 169 for Indigenous Rights. Working at this higher legal level will force the cause to be brought to the attention of the governance structures at that level and help in achieving the recognition they need. We understand that financial resources are tight for hiring a lawyer, which is why we suggest that the community approach the law faculties of the many well-regarded universities in Lima, in the hope that they may take interest in this unique legal case and be able to advise them, even at a paralegal level. Rather than leaving it to the municipality to conduct a census of the area, it would be beneficial to conduct a self-enumeration program that would show the authorities, campaigners, media bodies and the community themselves exactly how many lives are to be disrupted by the implementation of the VPR project. It would also highlight how much industrial and economic activity is conducted in the area and its benefits to the city as a whole. It is important to engage with outside organizations that have experience in these issues. Organizations such as CARP, Amnesty International Peru, Asociación Pro Derechos Humanos, and others like this. Cantagallo, along with other informal settlements in Lima, are part of a lack of governmental strategies that have been reinforced through time due to a lack of coordination between different levels of government, lack of public investment, and rapid rural migration. Therefore, a long-term metropolitan plan that incorporates participatory planning is necessary, if not vital, especially in those territories where new informal settlers are arriving.